For an equipment reference, I am watching all of my movies either on my dedicated 4K Blu-ray player in my bedroom on a 55-inch Samsung 8000 series 4K TV, and in my rec room on the Xbox One S Blu-ray player, watching those on a 65-inch Samsung 8000 series 4K TV. Just to let you know how I'm watching these movies.
So you're telling me we got the House Party Protocol, Infinity Stones, Hail Hydra, first time Thanos speaks on screen, a vibranium-powered robot, and a guy who gets small. Oh yeah, Marvel Phase 2. Let's get into it.
For me, it was Tuesday.
Welcome once again to another episode of For Me, It Was Tuesday. I'm your host, GQ. Do me a quick favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share the video, leave some comments, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Also check out culturejunkies.net to get plugged into everything that we do. So we're talking about Marvel MCU Phase 2. Let's get into it. So first off, you've got Iron Man 3. Now, Iron Man 3, pretty divisive film for a lot of people. Some people liked it, some people didn't. Obviously, the Mandarin thing threw a lot of people off. I personally didn't really have a huge problem with it, looking at the fact that the original Mandarin design is a kind of a quote-unquote Fu Manchu Chinese stereotype, and that's not going to play well in China in this day and age. And let's be honest, this movie made over $1 billion for a reason. China was a big part of that. The movie itself was pretty interesting. Again, like I said before, I was never a huge Iron Man fan before Robert Downey Jr. stepped into the role. This particular film, of course, brings back Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, Tony Stark. Don Cheadle is back as War Machine, but also known as Iron Patriot this time around. Gwyneth Paltrow playing Pepper Potts. Happy Hogan is again played by Jon Favreau, who is not directing this time. It's actually directed by Shane Black. You also have Guy Pearce playing the role of Aldrich Killian, and the incomparable Ben Kingsley playing the Mandarin, as best we know. So anyway, the film itself is pretty interesting. One thing that I will definitely point out is really funny that Tony Stark was doing a lot more detective work than even Batman was doing in his own films. Just keep that in mind. Tony Stark doing more detective work than the world's greatest detective, Batman. So I just want to throw that out there for all those that were complaining about the movie and him not being in the suit enough and all that other stuff. And again, I like the whole angle of him having post-traumatic stress disorder with this whole thing. I mean, let's be honest, the very last thing he was doing was Avengers, flew a nuclear missile through a wormhole that took him on the opposite side of the galaxy, and he killed a bunch of aliens and almost died on the other side of the galaxy in the Iron Man suit. So of course he's gonna have some type of fallout, some type of stress from that. No, you're not going to get demon in the bottle like they had in the comics. It's just not gonna happen. Let's be real. And let's be honest, on top of that, that was only one little quick story arc, so whatever. Yes, the Mandarin swerve kind of sucked. It really did suck because you had Ben Kingsley, an amazing actor, and in all the promotional material, they made it seem like this guy was going to be a major threat. And for them to do that swerve, it did suck. But like I said, I can understand a little bit why they didn't go with the quote-unquote Fu Manchu style, but they could have cleaned it up and just made him what he appeared to be in this particular film. No Aldrich Killian to back him up and be the true guy behind the scenes. Should have just been Ben Kingsley's Mandarin. Overall, very cool movie. Has its flaws, of course, and the fan base has obviously made known what they disliked about it. The 4K transfer on this one was really, really good. This is actually one of the last films out of the big group of stuff that got re-released. Iron Man 3 and all the Iron Man films came kind of a little bit later on in the whole process than some of them. Doctor Strange and some of the other ones that I'll be talking about later were the actual final films. But the 4K transfer looks great. Again, they carried over the same extras from the Blu-ray release of Iron Man 3. You also had the Agent Carter one-shot, which bar none is probably one of the best one-shots they've done. I honestly was watching it again before I did this review, and it's just amazing how they put that together, and Haley Atwell does a great job in that, and of course she got her own series out of it, and I wish that would have continued, but it didn't, so we're gonna move on. 2, Thor, The Dark World. One divisive film to another, and for a lot of people, some people say that's actually the worst film out of the MCU. Again, never really been a huge Thor fan, so going into it with the dark elves and all this stuff, it didn't really bother me that they were mishandled. Because again, I was never attached to him to begin with, so it didn't really bother me that much. Of course, Chris Hemsworth reprising his role as Thor. Natalie Portman coming back as Jane Foster. You also had Stellan Skarsgård as Dr. Selvig.
You've also got Tom Hiddleston as Loki.
And Christopher Eccleston as Malekith, the leader of the Dark Elves. And also, I'm gonna throw it out there, Kat Dennings as Darcy, because Kat Dennings is cute. So, moving on to the story. This particular film, this was the one that actually kind of dove into the Infinity Stones a little bit more, actually. It actually brought in what they called the Ether. It was, of course, in fact, the Reality Stone, or gem, or whatever you want to call it. Convoluted story to get it, to get us there. Apparently the Ether was something that the Dark Elves were going to use to combine all of the realms together and then plunge everything into darkness, essentially destroy the universe. Again, one of those universe-destroying villain type things. But of course, Odin's father, King Bor, sealed them away 5,000 some odd years ago, whatever it was. And we fast forward to present day, and now the entire cosmos and the 9 realms are going to align again. And if they have the Ether, they can start the plan again. And of course, Jane Foster's trying to find Thor, and she kind of stumbles upon the Ether in some weird gravitational, the realms are kind of closing in together sort of way, and she finds the Ether. It embeds itself into her. She gets, messed up. Thor comes and rescues her, takes her back to Asgard, and the story carries on from there. A lot of people didn't like this film for various reasons. Me personally, I didn't really have an issue with it, because what I did take out of it, it was showing that Thor as a character was continuing to grow and change, and it was his character arc. And this was, the middle part of his arc. In the first film, he was very arrogant and had to essentially learn, to be humble and have some humility in order to become worthy of wielding Mjolnir and be, essentially being a leader and obviously, potentially a future king. This time around, his mother, Frigga, played by Renee Russo, gets killed. So, like any guy out there, I'm pretty sure your mom gets killed, especially in front of you, you're gonna definitely have some strong feelings about that. But the interesting thing was, even though Thor was grieving over the loss of his mother, he still took the responsibility of knowing that, hey, there's still a threat out there, we got to do something about it. Whereas Odin, the king, the wise man he's always been, of course, again, played by Anthony Hopkins, was having all sorts of kind of, a breakdown, and we're going to, sacrifice as many as are needed, which is one of my favorite lines from him. And he was just kind of being a madman about it. And Thor actually was kind of being the grown-up in the room. So I like how they were showing that Thor was, continuing to grow even in the midst of, this extremely tragic time for him. Of course, the film ends the way most of the Marvel film ends, and that was part of the reason people say that Marvel has a villain problem. They kill off Malekith. Again, they did it using an Infinity Stone, so it's not like he was a weak sauce villain. An Infinity Stone took him out, so let's at least leave it at that. The guy did some heavy hitting. So moving on, we're going to check out Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Now, Captain America, the Winter Soldier is probably by far one of the most popular, if not most popular, Marvel films out there. Next to, of course, Infinity War and for some Endgame. This film is great. Again, Chris Evans comes back as Captain America. Scarlett Johansson comes in as the Black Widow. Samuel L. Jackson, outstanding actor, playing Nick Fury. And we get introduced to Alexander Pierce, played by Robert Redford, coming in as essentially the secretary of something. I don't remember exactly what his title was, but he's basically the guy that's over Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D., believe it or not. Essentially the liaison to the World Council, who Nick Fury, of course, is answering to, sort of, in the Avengers film. Into this film, it has a little bit of everything. Also, let me throw it in there, Sebastian Stan, of course, playing the Winter Soldier. Which of course title character, or shared title character. Now, this movie is awesome, period, bar none. There's probably very little wrong with this film. It was actually the first MCU film directed by Anthony and Joe Russo, the world famous Russo brothers. And they did an outstanding job with this film. It's very much a spy thriller type of film. Introduces Anthony Mackie as the Falcon. Again, Marvel building on their universe and building and adding in characters to the roster. This film is awesome. That's probably the easiest way to say it. It is, from beginning to end, awesome. They did a great job with bringing you into the world of S.H.I.E.L.D. and how Captain America has essentially, gone from his role of being, the man out of time in Avengers to, no, he's running a strike team. The movie starts off with him, exercising, and the infamous "on your left" line, of course, was born from this film, and he's running past Sam Wilson. And you move into, okay, Black Widow picks him up in this freaking kick-ass Corvette, the new model at the time of that particular year. And they're off. He's on a boat, running down enemy agents, knocking them overboard, taking people out, throwing the shield around, doing his usual thing. And he actually runs into another fighter, Batroc the Leaper, played by the very, very talented MMA fighter Georges St. Pierre, also known as GSP. They have a cool little fight scene. It's very cool. I enjoyed it. Cap had helmet hair, actually, and they left it in there. Moving in, you get to see that S.H.I.E.L.D. is becoming, after the events of the Avengers and of course aliens invading, they have just kind of stepped up their role, and they're like, look, we're going to try to take out threats before they happen. A little bit messed up, very, very dictator-like, actually, and of course Cap makes reference to it. It's like, hey, that's not freedom, that's fear. Usually the punishment comes after the crime. And Fury, for some odd reason, seems all completely on board with it. Even noticed it when I was watching it again for the review. His whole outfit looked kind of, not so much Nazi or German inspired, but it's very odd compared to what he was wearing on the helicarrier. We had, basically the mock turtleneck sweater, the leather pants or the long pants, combat boots, and that long kick-ass leather trench coat. Now he's wearing this very almost, dictator-style looking outfit, and it's really weird. And it kind of hints at there's something off about S.H.I.E.L.D. right now. Move forward, Fury gets ambushed on the street, as things happen, and we come to find out that there's definitely something wrong at S.H.I.E.L.D. And of course, we move forward through the story. They're piecing it all together. Like I said, very cool spy thriller. And we get to a point where we find out that Hydra has been embedded in S.H.I.E.L.D. for decades. And the moment that brings it all to light is the infamous Hail Hydra, which has become, at the time, became a huge meme. Very, very cool. Of course, Gary Shandling, who unfortunately is no longer with us, was playing a senator in the film, and of course he whispers into Agent Sitwell, who at the time we thought was a good guy, especially in that one shot he had with him and Agent Coulson, and also the other one shot he did, Item 47, I believe it was, and it's just like weird. So Sitwell has been a bad guy this whole time. Of course, we have that amazing elevator fight scene where Cap finds out that, hey, Hydra is in the middle of S.H.I.E.L.D. And of course, that elevator fight scene is still to this day probably one of the coolest setups. And it would be so weird to sit there and imagine that you had S.H.I.E.L.D., well, of course, undercover Hydra agents sitting there in the cafeteria, and then you get the call, hey, we need some volunteers to go to the elevator and, fight Captain America. I literally think I would, if I was a Hydra guy, I'd be like, hey, I'm sorry, I missed the call. I didn't hear you guys needed people to go take out Captain America. I was busy eating my broccoli cheddar soup. I missed that one. I'm sorry, guys. Maybe next time. So moving forward, again, the film itself is awesome. You guys have no doubt have seen it. Almost everybody has at least seen that film once. And the 4K transfer, now here's the thing, the Captain America films were some of the first ones that were transferred to 4K. And damn it, whatever they're using to do their transfer is not, there's no fail. It's the 4K transfer on this one is great. You've got a variety of scenes, night scenes, day scenes, color grading looks great. The fight on the street with Bucky and Cap is still freaking phenomenal. And again, The film is awesome. I'm just gonna, you know what? Captain America Winter Soldier, you guys know, it's freaking awesome. I mean, I don't even have to belabor that one. Let's move on to the next one that benefited big time. Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, Guardians of the Galaxy, for me, was probably one of the films that, again, just like Thor, just like Captain America, the original one, never a huge fan of the character. Guardians of the Galaxy was so far off my radar that I didn't really know much about the characters at all. When Rocket Raccoon showed up in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, it was like, well, that's interesting, that's different, whatever, okay, cool, you know. And then all of a sudden, here comes Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's like, oh my God, I missed quite a bit. So, Guardians of the Galaxy, of course, directed by James Gunn, starring Chris Pratt as Star-Lord, Zoe Saldana as Gamora, Dave Bautista as Drax the Destroyer, featuring the voice talent of Bradley Cooper as Rocket Raccoon, and of course Vin Diesel as Groot, who we all know says basically in the movie 3 words plus an additional 2 near the end, total of 5 different words. But all I can say is they made a believer out of me with this particular film. I did not expect these characters to be that just interesting to begin with, but for them to really endear all of those characters to me, somebody that would never even cared about their books, never picked up any of their books, nothing in the past, that's a great feat in my eyes. I mean, you got me to care about a talking tree and a raccoon, and it's like, wow, you guys did an outstanding job. The 4K transfer on this, now this film was colorful to begin with, but oh my God, the high dynamic range on this film, amazing. When they go to Xandar, all those brightly lit, brightly colored scenes, the color depth and the color detail is just so, it's crisp. It looks great. The scenes in Nowhere look amazing. Even the scene with on Sanctuary with Thanos and Ronan, when they're having their little back and forth, seeing that expansive starfield that Thanos is looking out into is just like, wow. That looks, I mean, it looked good before, but in 4K, dang, it looks good. So Guardians of the Galaxy, great transfer. Again, Ronan, played by an actor named Lee Pace, who I was not familiar with to begin with, to be 100% honest. Wasn't, you know, he was what he was. He was the antagonist, but Guardians of the Galaxy is very much one of those introductory films more focused on the heroes than worrying about Ronan and his backstory. Let's just be 100% honest. Also, you had Michael Rooker as Yondu, freaking phenomenal. That actor, his voice is so distinctive, and he did an amazing job as that character, even though he was walking around in blueface the entire movie. Not even going to worry about the story. We know how it went. Of course, Ronan destroyed again by an Infinity Stone. They got a track record there. But they did what they needed to do. They introduced us to Josh Brolin as not only the voice, but the motion capture for Thanos for the first time in the MCU. Freaking awesome. I remember sitting there in the theater watching that like, oh yeah, it's time. We get to finally see and hear what Thanos is going to be like. And by the time we get him in Infinity War, he's even better. So I'm just going to lay Guardians of the Galaxy to rest for right now and move on to Avengers: Age of Ultron. Now, for a lot of people, they didn't like this film. I liked it. Here's why. Of course, you have the same actors coming back, reprising their roles. You added in Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch, and also her brother Quicksilver. I apologize for forgetting the actor's name right off the top of my head. And you have James Spader giving his voice to Ultron. And I liked it. Of course, Joss Whedon came back to direct this. It's a follow-up to one of the biggest films at the time. And it's like, okay, you already set the bar way up here somewhere, so how you gonna top it? And yes, it was difficult to even come close to topping the Avengers, because again, Avengers was something that a lot of people didn't think was ever going to happen, ever. Like, that level of getting people to come together, actor schedules and all that, it just seemed impossible, and they did it. Now, here they are doing it again and upping the ante. So, Avengers: Age of Ultron, overall, the story was, The story has actually got a lot more depth to it than people give it credit for, in my mind. True enough, Ultron was not like he was in the comics. Yes, Hank Pym originally created Ultron. Well, Hank Pym hadn't been introduced yet, and even still, when he was introduced, he was an older character. It was interesting to see that the way that they spun it, where Tony, and with a little bit of Bruce Banner's help, created Ultron. I like the fact that Scarlet Witch messed with Tony's mind and tapped into his greatest fear, especially knowing what happened with the events of the first Avengers film. And on top of that, his own need to control things and to feel like he has some form of control. Him being the control freak that he's been through his entire life up until the events of Avengers was right on point. And especially after seeing that, hey, aliens are out there, the aliens invaded Earth, we need some huge line of defense to stop all of that. And of course, Tony being a tech guy, AI would probably be the best way to do it. So when they recover Loki's scepter from the Hydra base that were teased at the end of Captain America Winter Soldier, of course we find out that the scepter itself has the Mind Gem, Infinity Stone, gem, whatever you want to call it, inside of it. And that, amount of power and essentially intelligence is how Ultron gets built faster than he was normally supposed to be built. And I love James Spader's take on the character. Very sarcastic. It just worked for me. I enjoyed it. Yes, Ultron in the comics and even in some of the animated shows has been way more dangerous than he was shown here. But again, we're moving towards the Infinity Gauntlet storyline. Thanos doesn't need help. Thanos doesn't need a B team. Thanos is Thanos. I mean, granted, we did get the Black Order, but Thanos doesn't need other villains like Ultron and Ronin and all this what stuff running around during his story because, and again, you guys have seen Infinity War, you know how that goes. The transfer on Age of Ultron looks great. All of the Avengers films, once Infinity War came out, were released in 4K. Then, of course, Endgame came later. So the Avengers films have actually been released in 4K since Infinity War was released in 4K. So that was about 2 years ago. It looks good, of course. Again, the HDR, the high dynamic range, the color depth looks amazing. Age of Ultron, the story, some of the best parts, especially for me, highlights, especially even for the 4K transfer, the Hulk versus Hulkbuster fight. When I saw that little bit of tease in the trailer, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm definitely in. Because that's something I've always wanted to see realized on the big screen, and they did a good job with it. Yes, it was a short sequence, but damn it, was probably an extremely expensive sequence. So, I mean, I get that. I have no problem with that. The final battle with all of the Ultron bots and robots, pretty cool. Standard, huge CG army fare, but it was what it was, and I did enjoy it. And of course, we got the teaser with Thanos grabbing his empty Infinity Gauntlet at the time, saying that he's going to do it himself, and then proceeded to wait a couple of years and start. And that brings us to the last film in the Phase 2, Ant-Man. Now, of course, I've heard of Ant-Man, especially after a lot of the people were complaining about Ultron, saying that the Hank Pym, the other Ant-Man, made Ultron and this and that and blah, blah, blah. I get that, and that's fine. But with this particular film, stars Paul Rudd as Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man, Evangeline Lilly as Hope Van Dyne, the daughter of Michael Douglas's character, Hank Pym, in this particular film. Awesome beginning for this one. They start back actually in 1989 when the Triskelion Shield headquarters was being built in DC. We see a not quite old Hank Pym, but he's his older Hank Pym comes in, runs into Howard Stark, Tony's father, in his advanced age, of course, and then of course Peggy Carter, Haley Atwell reprised her role, and another agent that was there. Hank gets into a back and forth with them about them trying to replicate the Pym particle, and he's not having it. So he basically quits. And again, at the time, we're not told that he is, in fact, the original Ant-Man. And well, again, people that know, but we're not shown that he's the original Ant-Man just quite yet. It's just we know that he has the Pym particle, which reduces the space between matter and allows the shrinking to happen, but you still retain the density. It's really confusing and strange and weird how that works, because he was carrying around a full-size tank in his pocket on a keychain. So yeah, you made it smaller, but how did you make it lighter is kind of the question. So who knows? I mean, that's always the weird thing to me with this. But again, it's movies, it's comic book logic and science, so whatever. Fast forward to present day, at least for the film's view of it. We meet Scott Lang in prison. He's basically, looks like he's in a fight with another inmate, but actually that's their goodbye ceremony because he's about to get out. And we meet Luis, played by Michael Pena. And oh my goodness, you could tell he's enjoying playing this role. And he's outstanding comedian, great actor. The best, not even so much I want to say the best part of it, but the cool part about him is the energy that he brings to the role and the way he tells his recap stories. His recap stories are probably, bar none, the best thing about both Ant-Man films. And it's rumored that he has a recap story of the entire MCU, like the whole thing from Iron Man all the way to Endgame, I believe, or even Infinity War. I wish they would release that. I'd pay money to see that. I definitely would. So, moving forward, we see that Scott has a daughter that he's, of course, separated from because, well, you know, he went to prison and for, you know, being a thief, essentially. And his, you know, ex-wife or baby mama, whatever you want to call her, and her fiance, who happens to be in law enforcement, is of course taking care of his daughter. He crashes, but comes up to, you know, her birthday party at their house, and you know, gives her a present because again, he's trying to be a good dad. He's trying to do the right thing as best he can. He gets fired from Baskin-Robbins, the only job that he was able to get by lying on his application. But Baskin-Robbins always finds out, according to Luis. And we come to find out that, hey, there's a potential job coming up, and he goes and jumps in on the heist, and we get our first Marvel heist movie, and it's really, really good, actually. Again, Ant-Man is a character I was never a huge fan of, but Paul Rudd, the ageless wonder that he is, pulls you in. It makes you care about his character. His daughter is cute as a button. The actress that plays her is her delivery, I don't know if it's just because she is a young kid and they have good chemistry with Paul Rudd. I don't know, but she makes you feel for his longing to be with his daughter and be better in her eyes, and essentially, as is told to him by two different characters, to become the hero that she already thinks you are, or that she, you know, believes you to be. So I did like that dynamic of it, and the young actress playing his daughter, outstanding. The overall story itself is, you know, very, you know, heist movie. You know, he uses the Ant-Man suit. He has to, of course, learn it and how to use it and become proficient at using it. And on top of that, being able to work with and control the ants that are going to be helping him. We have a moment where he does an unseen heist on the new Avengers facility, which Hank thought was an old abandoned Stark warehouse, which of course we found out in the events of Age of Ultron. Yeah, no, it's brand new Avengers facility, and he makes it in there, fights Falcon in a very hilarious scene, gets what he needs and leaves. And hey, he fought an Avenger. Great job, awesome, you know, good work, Scott. So I enjoyed the film overall, though. I did enjoy learning about, you know, especially the MCU version of how this character was going to be brought in. Also seeing, you know, Hank Pym, you do get hot-headed Hank Pym, you know, which a lot of people were, you know, mad that Hank Pym wasn't the one that created Ultron. But I'm like, look, you got Michael Douglas playing Hank Pym. I think you got a good trade-off. And then Paul Rudd is great as Scott Lang, so it works. I enjoyed the film. The 4K transfer on this film looks great. The shrinking aspects, and then his view from a miniaturized view of a huge regular world looked awesome. The quantum realm you were actually able to give some better pauses on some of that, so you could actually see, yes, you do see, the quick hints of the Wasp, who, storyline wise, Hank's wife was lost to the quantum realm. At least at that point, that's what we had believed. So, all in all, the MCU Phase 2, great. Highlights, of course, of the Agent Carter one-shot on the Iron Man 3 Blu-ray, and the one-shot Hail to the King, which was kind of to fix the Mandarin story kerfuffle, which was included on the Thor: The Dark World Blu-ray. But I think, if I remember right, those were the last of the one-shots. That's when they decided they weren't going to do anymore. And it's sad because they were actually really, really good. But again, they were ramping up to what's coming in Phase 3, and you guys definitely make sure you tune in and join in and see my review. It's going to be a two-parter because Phase 3 is huge. It's going to be a two-part review, so you definitely want to check that out. So again, for me, it was Tuesday. I'm your host, GQ, but you thought I was going to forget. I got to leave you with these final words. For all of you there, when Tony called for a house party, and when Odin told us a little bit about the Infinity Stones, and when the Guardians of the Galaxy met up with, well, they didn't actually meet him, but we got to see Thanos for the first time. And a guy leaned in to whisper, "Hail Hydra." And then we got an entire city vaporized in mid-air because otherwise it would have destroyed the entire planet. And when a big guy got to look at things from a smaller guy's perspective. For all of you guys, that was probably like mind-blowing and just, hey, stop, enough. But for me,
It was Tuesday.
I'll see you guys next time.
If you're enjoying our content, please consider going to our Patreon and becoming a supporter. There are different tiers to select from, and we thank you for your support.
Culture Junkies!